touch and No, we're good. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for February 14th, 2023. For those of you who might not remember, February 14th means it's Valentine's Day, and I hope that the gentlemen on the committee and in the audience have taken the proper steps to take care of appropriate care for your significant other. I myself, I must brag, I got gorgeous flowers. I hope that other ladies here have been as fortunate. But with that, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Barrett, Boyd, Campbell, Camper, Cochran, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Hawk, Hicks, Kiesling, Lamberth, Love, Lynn, McKenzie, Miller, Moon, Parkinson, Shaw, Sparks, Whitson, Williams, Zachary. Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Are there any personal orders or announcements? None? All right, then we will get on with our business. We do not have any bills on the agenda today, but we do have 2 budget hearings. And so we're going to, without objection, go out of session and begin those budget hearings. We're out of session and we're going to ask our friends from the Department of Agriculture to come forward. And members, the presentation will be on dashboard, so you can find it there if you have trouble seeing the screen. Commissioner Hatcher, welcome. Welcome, and thanks to you and your team for joining us here today. If you'd introduce yourself and your team members, and then we'll just ask you to go straight into your budget presentation, and we will hold our questions till you're finished.
Good afternoon. I'm Commissioner of Ag Charlie Hatcher. Happy Valentine's Day. And I have with me on the front here part of the money team. This is Samantha Wilson and Chris Eaton. And I also have in the audience some more of the executive team if we get down too deep in the weeds. So the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, our mission is to serve, support, and promote agriculture and forestry, the largest and most important industries in the state. And we're thrilled to share with you the governor's proposed budget, and we're excited about that. So we're going to go from a 30,000 view perspective. As you can see, this is the first slide of our 2023-2024 cost increases. And I guess the most important thing to notice would be that let me get my glasses on here, is if you, the total requests are $19.8 million, as you can see on the left of the bottom column there. And we have 31 positions. And of this, 76% or $15.3 million of that is non-recurring. And if you look at the positions on the right-hand column, you can see there's a 16 for emergency preparedness and response, which is relevant because of our current bird flu response and position. And also post-pandemic or after the pandemic, that's relevant because of the zoonotic potential between those two viruses. And if you go on down, excuse me, to the regulatory portion, number 5, there's 9 positions. And so if you have the 16 and the 9 and also the forestry inventory analysis positions, the majority of these positions are either emergency response preparedness or regulatory positions. There's some pretty significant programs up here. The Ag Enterprise Fund is one that's done well in the past, and it's a big increase to that one to the tune of $16.5 million, and we're excited about that because of the high return on investment for that particular program of nearly 16 to 1. And then emergency preparedness is again big. That's much needed for our preparedness and response efforts. And then if you didn't know, we got 6 positions for FFA within the department, and that Camp Clements is a summer, it's a leadership training camp for FFA, and there's funding for that. Operations and support staff of 232.7, and then we have those inspector positions of 620. And the ag enhancement is authorized for that position for the funding that's already available there. And we're gonna hold questions to the end. Is that right, Madam Chair? Okay. Next slide. So here's the Camp Clements. There's also going to be a transfer of some money that was already in Department of Education's budget over to us. So the total there will be $400,000 for Camp Clements for support of that camp. Now this is something we're really proud of because of the tremendous support by Governor Bill Lee and the legislative body, yourselves here. I don't know any other state that comes even close to the record rural investment in Tennessee's communities, and from my perspective, a lot of those are agriculture and farming communities due to the farmland and the trees that are in those counties. And these federal funds at the top here, the commodities and food distribution, there was a record level of money that went out, but you can see the 25 million and the 44.5 million together there to 128 different schools, and those are predominantly pass-through funds, but nevertheless they were distributed out through the department. The second major category there, land and water stewardship. That's some federal money, but a large bulk of that is real estate transfer tax. You know, what real estate has done across the state in the past year. We had record month after record month, and those go, most of those monies go out to projects to soil conservation districts or counties, and that's distributed to farmers in those counties for land and water stewardship, and that's been a really good, well-managed program with John McClurkin in our water shop there. The Ag Enterprise Fund, relatively new program back to, I believe it started in 2018. You can see the economic impact there and the number of jobs that are created, and look at that return on the impact on local economies of $17.55 return. So that's where that $16.5 million would go to that. We're excited about that opportunity. And then really the program that doesn't need a whole lot of description, but this is the best producer cost share program in the United States, in my opinion, is the Ag Enhancement Program. A tremendous amount of investment in farming communities there, with 224+ million invested in almost 75,000 producer projects from its inception in 2005 through 2021. And those ag enhancement dollars generate an estimated $6.55 in local economies. Great program. We're excited to keep that one going. Next slide. Now, some of these, we thought we did a good job of demonstrating the need for these positions. We know that positions are hard to come by, and you have to really justify those. But we felt like we've got this current bird flu outbreak has surpassed the largest animal disease outbreak in history, which was in 2015. It surpassed that last month. And we've been especially hit in Tennessee. We've had a combination of 8 commercial and backyard flocks that have been affected. We have been doing fairly well on depopulation and getting those through cleaning and disinfection, and we're soon be about to clear the current premises that are on quarantine off of quarantine. But the highest risk is going to be coming around the first week of March as the birds start flying back north. So that's going to be, we feel like there's going to be more to come, and there's no end in sight to the bird flu threat. So we need that for the animal health division, for the lab, so that we can continue to provide the level of response that we need. The forestry, increased demand for those services. The department has, for several years now, we have deployed personnel to other states for a number of reasons. That's for training purposes, so that they're better prepared for outbreaks here, and we gain revenue from that. So the other states give revenue, so it's a 2-for-1, and the employees like that, and it makes us better prepared. The increased law enforcement response and presence. We have a very small crime unit. I believe, is it 5? 6 officers for the entire state. They have to do a number of counties. If you divide that out, it's 15 plus counties per officers. And they concentrate primarily on ag law and fire arson and those kind of things, cattle theft. And they processed 440 plus cases this last year. 5,000 acres of forest land and 2,000 head of livestock were their part of their caseload. The consumer and industry services, that's our regulatory portion. We feel like, well, we know we educate before we regulate. If there's any time that there's a real food safety issue, we take action immediately on those kind of things. But otherwise, we like to educate first. There's been a tremendous increase in people coming into the state, a tremendous increase in number of businesses in the state, as you know, and we've had an increase in the number of entities that require services for inspections. From a food safety perspective, for retail food stores, food processors, manufacturers. You wouldn't think, but Tennessee is a very large food manufacturing state with ice cream and yogurt, some of the largest in the world here. Weights and measures of all the fuel pumps. You'll see a Tennessee Department of Ag sticker on those. And those stations are increasing in numbers, and so the demand for those inspections are increasing, as well as the scales. The number of pesticide, pest control businesses, applicators, and groundwater quality services or inspections are also on the rise. So thus the ask for the 9 positions for the regulatory division. Next slide. This is another, there's a lot on this slide, but and most of this is, or some of this on the top is federal money. We were, the first one, the CFAB fund, as I call it, I believe this was one of the best uses of the coronavirus relief fund for ag and forestry in the United States. We were allocated 55 million, and we were able to distribute 43 million only because the federal government changed the guidelines on that 3 or 4 times or more. The emergency food program, we were awarded 9 million and got all that out the door. We were glad to provide that emergency food assistance. The Tennessee Department of Agriculture Veterinary Lab, the Cord Lab, American Rescue Plan monies of $5 million was awarded we've only distributed 607,000 so far, but that is for much needed infrastructure equipment for new licensing, permitting, and virtual mapping for our emergency preparedness and traceability. This one, I believe it tomorrow. Any day now, at least. And we're calling this the Farm Tough program. This is also some American Rescue Plan money, and the CFAB money or the fund went so well. We asked for this $50 million, and we're able to get that. And it's a similar program, and it's going to provide incentives to aid our supply chain, which we had a number of issues, especially during the pandemic, and still continue to have supply chain issues. And that'll help compensate agribusinesses for any COVID-related expenses, and some of those are still lingering. The UT Ag Research and Education, this money is also American Rescue Plan, and it goes toward this $50 million goes toward the research, primarily for the research experiment stations across the state, and that's to mitigate negative impacts, also again on the food supply chain, public health, and economic prosperity caused by the COVID pandemic and future large-scale disruptions. And that's going to be that's a godsend for those experiment stations across the state. The last one on the slide was the TSU Ag Research and Education. That's also American Rescue Plan monies, $32.25 million, and that's going to be for their science and food building on campus there. And we're excited about what that building will do as far as attracting faculty and staff for TSU, and also for addressing these issues that you see on the slide. Okay, I believe that's the last slide, and we can entertain questions now.
Thank you, Commissioner. There's a lot of information there, and I know that we do have some questions, and I believe my first questioner is Chairman Kiesling.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Appreciate it. Mr. Good to have you with us. And if I may, Chair Lady, before I get into my question, I'd like to take personal privilege to be sure and tell the Commissioner they had two great fellows watching his back today. They are, of course, Andy Holt, who is our Director of Business Development for the department, as well as our dear friend Dale Barnett, Executive Director of Tennessee Poultry Association. It's certainly good to have you all here with us. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Commissioner, we're going to lead off. I've got a couple of questions, total of four-part question, a total of 4 parts. But anyway, the first one, the proposed, your budget includes state funding to establish 19 new positions, which of course you're aware of. One of which is funded with equity, and then 9 new positions funded to your regulatory fund, and then finally 2 with funded with federal funding, I should say. Now, according to your department's response to our committee's questionnaire, your department currently has 61 vacant positions, 21 of which have been vacant longer than 12 months. Generally speaking, could these vacant positions be reclassed rather than create new state-funded positions? If not, why?
Madam Chair, if I would, can I have Danny Sutton, Assistant Commissioner for Consumer and Industry Services, come up and address
Certainly.
that?
And Mr. Sutton, if you would just identify yourself and your role for the record, please.
I'm Danny Sutton, Assistant Commissioner for Consumer and Industry Services, Regulatory Branch of the Department of Agriculture.
Do I need to repeat that question?
No, I believe.
No, I didn't know if you got it or not.
Yeah, I believe the vacancies that you're seeing, some of which are positions that we've just had a hard time filling since COVID set in. Some of those other positions, I believe, are part-time temporary workers that we use as minors during our efforts with the Department of Mental Health that we take out with us to do stings on underage tobacco sales. So we have about 40 of those positions available, and we typically don't have but about 20 youth in those positions. The remaining positions are, our pay scale had caused us to have a little bit of trouble keeping inspectors on board and keeping team members, not only in CIS, but other teams of the Department of Ag, which there's been a lot of corrections made to. We hope that those positions are going to be filled soon. I think the expansions that we're looking for under the regulatory side are specifically to deal with the Blue Oval City that will be going down in West Tennessee that we just will not have the manpower for when we have 30,000 new people in Tennessee and a lot of new houses and a lot of new gas stations and a lot of new grocery stores and a lot of new food manufacturers.
Thank you. Would there, Madam Chair, would there anyone that be wanting to questions on that? Maybe on that particular question? I do have another one, Madam Chair.
We'll just follow up with Commissioner Sutton. Can you speak to the salary market adjustment? We've heard, every department, every agency that's been in front of us, there is just an issue with getting employees because of the competitive marketplace. So are you tell us how that salary market study and the subsequent actions have helped or not in your department?
So personally, for my section here in CIS, and I really feel like for the whole department, this has been fantastic. We were opening positions 6 and 8 months ago and having 2 and 3, maybe 4 applicants. We've had a dozen positions open in the last 2 or 3 weeks that we're having 13 and 15 applicants for. So some of the positions are still so specific or demand such education coming in the door, like some of our veterinary that animal health would have, that I think there's still a little bit of work that could be done there. But as far as my regulatory team, I think we're looking really good moving forward, and we appreciate all those efforts.
All right, thank you. Chairman Kiesling?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Foreign, here we go with some foreign animal disease testing. I got three questions with that. In fiscal year 22-23, the legislature approved just under 800,000 reoccurring to the Animal Health Division for 3 positions. And there would be testing supplies, equipment, and travel. So your fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget would establish 13 additional positions within that same division. 1A, were the 3 positions from last year filled? Have they been filled yet?
Those 3 positions, if my memory serves me correctly, were contract positions. We're having so much trouble trying to hire pathologists specifically. We thought we'll go the contract route since UT has usually a stable full of board certified pathologists. And that process has been started, but we have not contracted with UT yet. I just talked to the lab director on the way over here today, and we're working through that. But it's similar issues trying to hire people in at some of our salary ranges. Is
Got
difficult.
you. Well, we're hearing that exactly from everyone. Yeah, thank you. All right. B, for the animal diseases the department monitors, are there areas of the state which have in particularly higher concentrations of these animal diseases, Commissioner?
Yes, particularly bird flu, the Mississippi flyways, mostly in West Tennessee. And so that's where we're seeing the bulk of our detections right now.
Okay, thank you. And finally, what types of mitigation efforts is the division involved with to prevent the spread of animal diseases?
Oh, that's a big question. So we usually hang our hat on biosecurity for most all disease prevention. It's really difficult for this particular one, for the migratory waterfowl, when it's dropping from the sky, or some of the feces and some of the birds from the sky. So we have, it's a lot easier to protect the commercial flocks because they're indoors, and they can have certain biosecurity measures that really help protect them. But the outdoor flocks, the backyard flocks, are almost impossible to protect. So that's why we're so at risk there.
Got you. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. And Chair Lady, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And just for all of the people who shop out there and buy eggs and are, having to take out a second mortgage sometimes in order to do that. Do you have any expectations or any information about timeline in terms of egg production in Tennessee specifically, and then what we might expect, any kind of mitigation on those prices anytime soon?
Well, I don't think it'll be in the next few months because we're going to be the highest risk starting that first week of March as the birds start flying back. But some say that the virus may burn itself out if it mutates enough, but experts say that could be a year. So not on the short term.
All right, so it may be Easter with plastic eggs. Okay. Leader Lambert.
Madam Chairman, just as a public service announcement, we've got 40-something chickens in the backyard, and I'll be happy to bring you a dozen of fresh eggs, just like I brought for Susan Lynn and others and everything else. And they're some of the best. It's from the 4-H chick chain. So if you get involved in 4-H and you get involved in the chick chain, you don't have to worry about egg supply in this world. You can just go ahead and go out every morning and get your eggs. But since you don't have that, I'll take care of you, Madam Chairman.
And I appreciate it very much. And so will my grocery allowance. Next on the list, Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Commissioner, thank you and your team very much. I appreciate all the work that you've done as working for the #1 industry in the state of Tennessee, our agricultural industry. So thank you very much. I want to go back to slide, I guess it's slide number 2, your cost increases. At the top, you're talking agricultural enterprise fund. Let's break that down a little bit. Your budget is 16.5 million. 15 million of that is non-recurring. Let's talk about who all is applying for this. I saw in the questionnaire you filled out, you've set a record for 29 pages of responses to the questionnaire. So there's a lot of responses there. And I'm seeing that. Well, let's talk about the number of folks who are applying and receiving these grants, and is there a matching nature of this grant? What's the garden variety posture in the Agricultural Enterprise Fund?
Madam Chair, could I bring Andy Holt up to address that?
With great trepidation, we agree.
Okay.
Well, if I knew that was going to be the response, I may not have asked that question.
Well, I could answer it, but he's much more qualified than I am.
Commissioner Holt, please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andy Holt, Assistant Commissioner for Business Development. It's actually in your area, and the gentleman back behind you, the chairman of the subcommittee. There's been several folks that are on this panel today that have had different constituents who have applied for the Ag Enterprise Fund over the last few years. This is an initiative that really has been in play for 4 to 5 years. The amount of funding that is proposed currently is a significant increase, and there's several reasons behind that. First of all, it was actually more than what we anticipated, but the success of the program, and I think you can probably see in one of the earlier slides where we actually reference some return on investment studies that we had the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, the Ag Economics Department performed for us, actually showed that over the course of this particular cost share program's life, that we saw $17.55 per dollar of investment. And so these particular types of as we call them AEF, but again, the Ag Enterprise Fund, typically those are awards that are going to larger agricultural types of operations. That they have a nature that implicitly has an impact on a number of different producers. The types of projects that have been very successful with this type of cost share program have been focused on grain handling, also been focused on feed milling, focused on forestry products, things that, again, sort of serve as a centralized type operation that has impacts on a number of agricultural or forest product producers.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, noticing the 1,761 new jobs created over time for these funds. That's tremendous. Are we expanding it to other areas? I'd like to keep it all in my neck of the woods, and I know the subcommittee chair would too, but is that part of the expansion? Are we going into other communities, other type operations?
Yeah, so this particular award, and I don't have the stats in front of me, but I can get those for the committee, no problem. Can tell you which counties that those investments have taken place in. But there's been pretty good distribution from one end of the state to the other. And we, again, try to focus in that program specifically on the at-risk and distressed counties. Typically the at-risk and distressed counties are gonna have the industries of agriculture and forestry present. And that's been one of the big pushes that the governor has put forward, and the General Assembly has also joined in on that effort to try to make sure that we're making these specific investments into the counties that need them the most. But to generally answer your question, yeah, I think we could show a good dispersion across the state. There may be, a good bit of variance on the particular type of subcategory of agriculture or forestry that those awards have been made to, but there's a good distribution across the state.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you. And quick question. I'm going to ask an obscure question here. Our agricultural specialty license plate. The license plate, we've generated almost twice as much as we've expected the last few years. It's not a huge amount. We're looking it's under $600,000, but it's $250,000 more than we anticipated. Where do those dollars go? And I'm asking specifically, we've got 300 FFA programs across the state of Tennessee. If we could get each of them an extra $1,000, that might go a long way. Can we talk a little bit about where those educational monies go?
Yeah, I'll start on that and I'll pass it to Samantha, probably here to follow up if you don't mind. So we flag those dollars primarily for educational programs. So they could go for an FFA chapter. They could go for a livestock association that's having a judging competition or something like that. But it has to have that comes before we have a committee that goes through those applications when they come in, and we base it on an educational component and then and some other factors. But Samantha, if you want to expand on that.
Yes, Samantha Wilson, Department of Agriculture. Commissioner's right. We do have them for special projects for education related. I did want to note that we do already have set aside $55,000 for FFA and then another $55,000 for 4-H, but we're happy to look into it even further.
Next on my list, Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. On the TAEP monies, it says that in your questionnaire that about $21 million go to that, and as of June 22, there was 13 million. Can you tell me how those funds are being used, and how do we get Tennesseans the information they need to be aware to apply for these?
Okay, I'll pass that one to Andy as well.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. So much like what Commissioner Hatcher had spoke about earlier when we were going through these slides, the Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program is, and I'm happy to say it, really the envy of a lot of other states. The fact that in 2005, monies were directed toward the purpose of investing in long-term infrastructure to help farmers in Tennessee be able to produce more efficiently and more effectively. We've seen the effects of those investments across the state, and we've seen those in the increase in the genetic composition of cattle that are produced in the state, the quality of forages that we're feeding those animals, the marketing opportunities, the handling of those animals. And so in essence, there is a great adoption of this program across the state right now, but we are continuing to always look for different types of ways to increase the awareness of that particular program. We're seeing on average over 7,000 applications from year to year. Last year was the first time we actually saw a decrease in the number of applications. And we think that's mostly relative to supply chain impacts, the increased cost of goods, and maybe some other factors. But in essence, it's an extremely popular program. It's been extremely well received and extremely well supported by the governor and also by the General Assembly. We appreciate that very much. Had an additional $5 million given to us on a recurring basis to support that program a year ago. And in essence, we continue to see the popularity growing from year to year. The programs that are supported with those funds include a number of different programs relative to livestock health, livestock handling equipment. We have producer diversification. We also have some incentives for commercial poultry producers. There's a breadth of different programs that are included in the Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program. And if at any point you ever want to have a conversation about the specifics of those, I could be more than happy to sit in with you.
Chairman Crawford?
Do you attribute a lot of these successes that you were just mentioning to the new marketing position?
Which new marketing position?
It's in your questionnaire. It's a specialty person or position that's included into the budget for specialty
In my
work
shop.
for.
Okay. Yeah. So this is, we have a team of 8 business consultants right now that are in with business development. We've asked for an additional one. We've not to this point had someone who focused on row crops. And so that's the new marketing position that you're referring to. I apologize for not knowing that particular name that you used on that one. But that would add an additional person to again, focus on what is our number one cash crops in the state of Tennessee. Corn and soybean production are something that we do see a higher amount of production in West Tennessee, but we see production of those small grains all across the state of Tennessee, and we're seeing an increasing amount year over year as we're producing new markets for those grains to be marketed. And obviously we're seeing extremely high commodity prices we have over the last several years, just as a result of demand and also increased input price.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you. And just a follow-up for either Commissioner Hatcher or Holt. Last year, this legislature passed some tax relief for farmers that basically mirrored what we do for manufacturers in Tennessee. Can you speak to the impact that change has had on farmers in Tennessee? Can we see a result of that, of our actions?
Yes, Madam Chair, I believe you can. So that's really helped clarify that sales tax exemption for farmers, because previously some establishments they go into, there were some products that weren't on that list for whatever reason. You could go into a certain and it wouldn't qualify. But with this situation, with the new law, if they have their ag sales tax exempt card and it's used for farm or farm production, then they should get that exemption. And so it's having an impact already. And even on they can purchase building supplies too to build barns on their own farm with their own hands, and that's I believe that's going to have a big impact as well.
All right, well, always good to follow up on our actions and determine if they were useful. Next on my list is Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Commissioner Hyde, thank you for being here. And former Representative Hull, good to see you. And Chris Eaton, good to see you. I have a lot of friends here. Commissioner, last year in the budget, we provided $9 million to further develop the Wilson County Fair or the State Fair, and an additional $1 million in grants for each county to be divided between the counties for regional agricultural fairs. Can you provide us an update on the development of the State Fair and how the $9 million was utilized?
Yes, I can start on that, and Samantha and Chris can help follow up. So there's been a lot of construction going on out there on site. The Made in Tennessee building, which will highlight the 95 counties, will be, I think there's going to be an open house somewhere around May 1st. They're in discussions too on the birthing barn, where they'll demonstrate livestock being born of all different species. That's going to be a highlight. I think they've got some restrooms under construction as well. It's the excitement out there is building. They had, was it 750,000? What was the attendance? Yeah, it was a huge attendance. They're 15th on the list of attendance for state fairs in the country. We think it'll soon reach the top 5. There's going to be some growing pains. So we have traffic issues and some other things going on out there, but it's looking good.
Mhm. Well, the budget doesn't contain any additional funding for fairs. Can you also update us on the grants that went to each county and regional agricultural fair? And how has the money gone out? And how much approximately went out to each fair?
Okay, I'll pass that to, if you don't mind, to Samantha or Chris.
I apologize, I don't have the breakout per fair, but I can definitely follow back up with the committee to get that. But all of the grants we did do as an endowment straight to the Fair Association. So they were in charge of distributing those for us. And then same with Putnam County and Houston County. We gave them an endowment grant and they got the money right up front at the beginning of the fiscal year.
So if you would provide that information, and I believe Commissioner Holt was also going to provide the information that was, we were discussing earlier around the counties and how those grants were distributed, that'd be helpful. Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, good to see you. Quick question about something we've done recently in the last few years, the farm to tap. Last year, we put 400,000 in it. Just wondering, could you speak to it? How are we doing? What does that look like going forward? Has it been a benefit, Tennessee? Could you speak to that for us?
Yeah, that's been a huge success, so much so that I think it's going on another year, isn't it? Yeah. So we just had our business development team. We just had a convention of really it was farm. What do they call it, Andy? Yeah, the barley growers in farm products. We had there were wine producers, beer producers, and distilled spirits, and it was a massive crowd. We had, 200 and some odd in attendance. So there was a lot of interest in that, and a lot of that came from that Farm to Pint program because it helped connect farmers with microbreweries, and microbreweries are really they're one of the rapid growing businesses there is, and so we're hoping we can build off that so that there's a demand for local products of all types, which would be barley and hops and grapes and corn, so that more of it's into beverages that could be, the ingredients could be from a farm.
Another question, there was in the proposed budget from the governor, there's monies for a purchase of emergency preparedness software. Can you describe for us what that software actually is, what it will do, and is that something for interdepartmental, or is that something that would be used in a broader basis?
Yeah, I think I can address that, and you can help me too. That's Trace first. No. Okay, I will pass that to Samantha because I was confused a little bit on it.
Samantha Wilson. So the 255,000 goes towards 2 systems. We have 55,000 that will go for our ag crime unit, and that's for a system to help them better talk with what is currently implemented by TBI, so that when we log cases, it goes through a little quicker and we can kind of do some more background checks. The other 200,000 is for our Division of Forestry. It's for a CRM system to help with landowner assistance.
Can you be a little more specific about what kind of landowner
Yeah.
assistance?
If I could actually call David Arnold up, I would love to lean on him some.
Mr. Arnold, if you would just state your name and position for the record.
Yes, David Arnold, State Forester, and that CRM is for us to better track the work that we do with Tennessee's forest landowners whenever we're providing them service to help them manage their forested properties, whether that's for timber or hazard mitigation or just the services that we provide our Tennessee forest landowners.
And this software, is that going to require recurring funding, or is it cloud-based and there are updates that will be automatically done? How's that going to work?
Yes, both systems for the vast majority is non-recurring. There's just a little bit of maintenance tied to the forestry system. I believe 50,000.
50 of the 200 and,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, so a quarter. All right, I have Representative Sparks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner, I had a constituent wanted me to ask about adequate laboratory support compared to other states.
Yes, sir, I can address that. So, Tennessee has one animal health lab. It's called Cord Lab. As compared to other states, most all other states in the Southeast have several. I think Virginia has 4, Alabama has 3, North Carolina has several. But anyhow, the lab has faced, over the last decade, several budget cuts, and so it was impacted by that. But that was the reason for the ask for these animal health and lab positions, and we got all the positions we asked for. So we are concerned about the capacity of the lab, and we've had trouble in the animal health division and the lab in hiring people. We've made great progress due to the big HR's compensation package changes, and we're encouraged by that. We recently had 8 positions open in the animal health division, which was critical, almost a 40% vacancy. And we're hiring for some AHT slots, but we've got tremendous number of applicants. We've got 25 applicants for the 4 or 5 slots, so we're encouraged by that. So we know we've got some work to do in vacancies, and we got some money in equipment, we got some money in personnel, so we're doing all we can to come up to speed.
Wanted to thank you for the partnership with Cultivate and Joey Langford. I love his testimony, love his passion for helping others. And if folks don't know about Cultivate and Joey Langford's story, I encourage you to maybe go out there. Maybe there could be a tour or something out there. See what he's doing. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, committee.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Commissioner, COVID relief funding, have a question or two in reference to the COVID relief funding. And normally those federal dollars comes with rules, regulations, and all of the above. For an example, the CAFB fund at 55 million, and you've distributed at this point 43 million. And then when you look at UT Ag Research Education, and they say the purpose, enable partners to develop practical solutions, mitigate negative impacts on food supply chain, public health, et cetera, 50 million. I guess the amount distributed is to be determined at this point. The question is, how much discretion do you have? And you mentioned earlier a committee on exactly how those dollars are distributed. How much discretion do you all have?
A lot to that question. So those funds were assigned to us through the Financial Stimulus Accountability Group, which was what a group the governor put together. And then that was there was a contractor on the first wave. The CFAB was Horn, wasn't it, Andy? Which was kind of an accounting firm of such that had a software package that kept that on track. And same kind of safeguards are becoming, you're right, it comes with a lot of different conditions and rules because and so we have to meet all those conditions and rules that the federal government sets. And it's a pretty complicated procedure, but I will pass to Andy to tell you about the safeguards and how that money's managed. But go ahead.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for the question, Representative Miller. So Commissioner Hatcher had reference to when the program was going to start, and it is upon us tomorrow. Actually, we're going to have a webinar at 9 a.m. and at 1 p.m. to talk about a lot of what you're referring to. In essence, we want folks who engage in that program to understand these aren't state dollars. This is federal money. It is subject to the uniform guidance. So that is acquisition and also disposition of those funds, as well as all of the procurement guidelines that are typically associated with those federal dollars. So, based on whether it's a micro purchase of $10,000 or less, a purchase between $10,000 and $250,000, where there has to be, a bid process, and then any projects that receive $750,000 or more actually are subject to a single audit. And so we want all the participants who will hopefully benefit from these dollars to recognize that they do come with, again, as we oftentimes see, strings from the federal government. Even in spite of that, though, this is an unprecedented amount of money that we've received, and that will be invested in agriculture all across the state of Tennessee. And if I may give just a couple of details about this money, in essence, we have this $50 million that will be given to us in 3 phases. In essence, we've already received the first phase that was from July of 2022, and that first round of funding will take applications starting on March the 1st for the farm cost share. So that's forestry, agriculture, and rural markets. That's the farm part. The tough part is the Tennessee Urban Farms and Forests. And that's going to be another program that will hopefully come into fruition a little bit later this year. But generally speaking, we're going to apply $45 million to the farm program, $5 million to the urban farm and forest program. But you are correct. We want to make sure that folks are very clear that these dollars, these pass-through dollars that we're handling, are going to be subject to a lot of the uniform guidance standards.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady. And Commissioner, thank you and your staff for being here. I want to go back just for a second. Just got a quick question about the ag enhancement grants. So with the utilization being not hardly what it has been in the past, is there any thought to maybe, I guess, lightening up on any of the requirements? I get a lot of folks in my district, they don't meet that. I guess it's 30 head of cattle now, I think is one of the requirements. And some of them bump right up against that. And they say, what about, I hear this all the time, what about the smaller farmer? They're raising beef cattle and hay and everything else. So what is out there, or is there any thought to maybe lightening those reins up a little bit?
Well, we have a Ag Enhancement Advisory Group that helps us on the makes recommendations, and they're convening coming up, right? And so we listen to that. But you're right. We get it across the board. We get it. What do you do to the really small ones? And we just felt like you have to set a limit somewhere. You could get 1 or 2 cows or 1 or 2 goats, and I don't know if that would be a good investment or not. And then you get it on the other end. We have another group that says, well, why don't you push it more toward full-time farmers, so you get more really impact on the economy? So it's all across the board. But I would, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I'll pass that to Andy too, because he hears it from all sides, and he can further define.
Commissioner Holt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Hicks, Chairman Hicks, I think you're right. And Commissioner Hatcher is correct. We just have to put guidelines somewhere on what is expected to be, a participant in that particular program, and not to be counter to what you said, but we don't have a decrease in utilization. The funding is definitely completely fully utilized. We just saw a slight dip, about 100 and some odd applications from our 21 to a 22 program, but we literally. And this is not a suggestion, not a request, but we could literally put another $20 million in that program and utilize every cent of it each year. One of the complaints that we consistently receive is that the cost of projects continues to rise exponentially, and the amount of cost share that we're able to put toward each project, has remained relatively stagnant throughout time. And so, again, I wouldn't I wouldn't turn away any additional funding for that particular program, but we think we've struck the balance that's the best that we can possibly strike. But again, we're definitely listening to our advisory committee each year and any recommendations that they have. And there's a million other things that we could fund through that program, but we have to look at what was the vision of that program when it was first established, try to maintain that. How do we increase the profitability of farms with investments in long-term infrastructure to help those farms become successful?
So would there be a number, I guess, out there with the, I guess, 29 million? Is there a number that would capture, I guess, with all the applications that were put in, if they were all funded, what would that number be? Do you all have any idea? Just wondering, how much would we grow that? I mean, we're a state that's, known for agriculture. We pride ourselves on that. And like you said, that fund has been stagnant for quite a while now. And I'd certainly be interested to know, where would we go to? What number should that be? And that's all I've got. I do want to say thank you to Andy Holt. He has been up to Hancock County and up there, and with the grant recipient up there. And I do want to say thank you for all your hard work on that.
Absolutely. So each year, what we try to do is we see what the total amount of requests are, which is a very sizable number. But then we also recognize that when folks apply for those monies, a portion of those dollars will never actually be claimed. And so there is a balancing act every year. When we get this total request of $60 million, and we know that we only have so many dollars that we can put toward this, then, what we try to do is try to balance out and say, where do we project we're going to end up so we can fully utilize all the funds that we have available to us? I couldn't really say a number off the top of my head, but Chris or Samantha may have some ideas on that. Commissioner may have. If you just want to give us 100 million, we'll just see how far that goes. So,
Yeah, we put that on a spreadsheet and look at it every year, and we count on that utilization because we don't want to overcommit because we wouldn't have the money to fill it. But Samantha, you can address it maybe a little bit better on when we look at those numbers. But I think it's close to, it's half again what we have available is what we usually get requested, I believe, somewhere around there.
Yeah, if we want an exact amount, I know we do have a dashboard out there that shows what was completely requested this year, which we can, again, follow up with the committee and give you. But yeah, utilization rate is usually about 75%, sometimes a little lower now with supply chain issues being an issue, just because they do have to submit the invoices before we do pay out the dollars.
Chairman Hicks. And I guess sort of a follow-up to that, those are the dollars, the applications that you receive based on the current criteria. So to Chairman Hicks' point earlier, if you were to lower the criteria, then we would expect there would be additional applicants and additional utilization. But as you pointed out, no matter where we lower it, there'll be somebody bumping up against that limit as well. So.
Yeah, I will say that we started a beginning farmers program. This is the second year. And we did that on purpose. So they're exempt from those minimum requirements so that they can get started. And they've got 2 years.
A total of 5.
Total of 5 years to get their projects underway or get their legs under them.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. Thank y'all for being here. Could whomever just kind of walk me through the beginning farmers program, how it works?
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, Andy Holt for this one too.
Commissioner Holt.
Thank you, Chair Lady and Representative Shaw. It's good to see you. It's good to be back in committee with you. And so Commissioner Hatcher, from the beginning, from the time I came on board until now, and I want to answer your question, but I want to add a little bit to it, if that's okay, has really pushed not only to me within business development, but across the entire department, that part of our job is not just to support currently existing farm operations, but it's to recruit folks into the sector of agriculture as well. And one of the best ways that we have found to do that is to incentivize them, and not only to incentivize them, but to educate them. And so through the process associated with the beginning farmer designation within the Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program, there's a higher educational threshold, and we offer a couple of different opportunities for them to receive a more concentrated, more concerted effort toward educating them about farm profitability, different types of operations that they can engage in, but to also help them recognize that for them to be as really as benefited by the program as possible is that the collaboration that we're trying to introduce them to as they are engaging in these educational activities associated with the beginning farmer, that we're introducing them to folks who can help them in their journey, whatever that may be. Much like what Commissioner Hatcher said earlier, we do pretty much disband the requirements on the number of head, the number of acres that each of the particular programs call for, so that we can again invite those folks in and begin that process of being an applicant within Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program. One other program that is still a conceptual one that we're looking to apply for is the federal government, specifically through USDA, has just really put out lots of opportunity for us as a state agency and as for operators individually to apply for different funding. And one of those funding sources through USDA is for us to apply for a $750,000 grant, in essence, that would come from the federal government for us to use to attract folks into agriculture. And so we would do that through work skills. We would do that with beginning farmers. We do that through a number of different types of associations. And as much like any other industry, there's lots of associated groups within agriculture for the subsectors that comprise agriculture. We would like to designate those funds to, in essence, be like a scholarship for beginning or for new farmers to become engaged with some of those networks that are already created. And that's an endeavor that we're looking at as well. But Commissioner Hatcher always has in mind not only support the folks that we have in the industry now, but help us attract new folks into the industry, and also try to educate those new applicants and those new beginning farmers as well. And really the focus on FFA and 4-H has been really good as well, because that's a great pool for us to pull from.
I see no further hands, and I spoke too quickly. Representative Parkinson, and I would ask you, we're a little over time, so if you can, brevity is the key.
Smart brevity. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I just wanted to say hi and congratulations to my dear friend over here. You know, you look good on the other side, and but I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Representative Parkinson, we're delighted you could join us for that message. Commissioner, thank you and your team for being here today. And as you can see, there's a lot of interest in what you all do and this committee. And I think the legislature as a whole appreciates very much the role that agriculture plays in our state and the role that you all play in helping that be successful. So thank you for joining us.
We appreciate the support.
We're going to ask now, as the agriculture folks depart, we're going to ask our Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency folks to come to the front. Well, welcome, Director. So if you'd just like to introduce your team, and we'll get underway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, my name is Mike Bell. I'm the Legislative Director for the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here today to present our budget before the House Finance Committee. Madam Chair, to my left, I have Mr. Brandon Ware, who is our Deputy Director over Field Operations. To my right, I have Mr. Ken Tarkington, who is our chief of business. I think chief of business operations. Then I have our executive director, Mr. Jason Maxidon. And then to his right is our deputy director of business operations, Mr. Frank Fiss. And so I will turn it over to Director Maxidon to let him start with the presentation, Madam Chair.
Well, Mr. Bell, we're delighted to see you here, particularly in light of recent incidents in your life. So we're very happy to have you in front of us. And it's going to be really interesting to have you on that side of the table.
Madam Chair, I've a number of you I've worked with on legislation over the years, and I look forward to working with you in this capacity to make sure that our agency is running as smoothly as it can.
And hopefully you didn't work against any of our legislation in the
I'm
past.
sure I didn't, and if I did, I've forgotten about those, Madam Chair.
With that, Director Maxidon, please continue with your presentation.
There we go. Sorry about that, Madam Chair. Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This afternoon, I'm going to be presenting our budget to you, and I want to start out with a little bit of a brief introduction. We've had a lot of questions about our budget, and we realize that it is different than the other executive branches. So I'd like to just kind of take a moment to maybe help explain it just a little bit better. And I want to start with our operating funds. One of the things that we're very different from the other executive branches is we don't get much general funds appropriation. In fact, we get about $383,000. The rest of that is typically funded through license sales, which is generated by our license buyers. And in addition, we get federal match dollars. And I'd like to go through and kind of explain how that works. For me, it's easy to explain it in this format. Being new as a director, I wanted to come up with a way that I could understand it. And I put it in terms of kind of like a checkbook. We basically live off of what we make. So where we are different than the other executive branches, whatever income we bring in, it rolls forward to the next year instead of getting another state appropriation. So I want to talk to you about the three funds that we operate out of, and this is what makes us a little bit different. We have a wildlife, a boating, and a wetlands fund, and then we have reserve accounts that go along with those three funds. So I want to explain those three funds to you today in a little bit more detail. So the wildlife fund is made up primarily of license sales. This is the sale of hunting and fishing license. It makes up about 44% of that fund. So we have to spend money to get federal reimbursement back. And you all have probably heard of the Pittman-Robertson and Dingell-Johnson Acts. And these are appropriations that are reimbursed to us through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And the way that we get those, we have to spend those dollars in order to get that match from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to come in and reimburse us for that money. Now, one thing, the reason I say there's three different checking accounts, we cannot mix those funds. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does not allow us to do that. As I go through the funds, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's considered a diversion of funds, and they can take our federal money that comes in if we try to spend it on something besides what belongs in that fund, and I'll talk a little bit about what some of those things are. 23% of this fund is made up of state and other funds. These are things like timber sales, crop share leases. You may have heard about our partner foundation that raises conservation raffle. That's where some of that money goes, is into this fund as well. So some of the examples that these projects will be working on, most of you have a WMA in your district or somewhere close to you. Cheatham WMA is one of the closest ones. And so those funds are spent out on those wildlife management areas for road improvements or for habitat improvements. Trout stocking. You typically think about this in an East Tennessee stream, but those of you that have municipalities or near a big metropolitan area, we're trying to ramp up our efforts and really stock some ponds to provide winter fishing for folks in those areas. Of course, you know about our enforcement of hunting and fishing rules. And then last is shooting ranges. This is where a lot of this apportionment comes from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So right now, it's not just people that are hunting and fishing. We're getting a large portion of these federal excise tax dollars that are coming into us from the sale of firearms and the sale of ammunition. And so folks that don't traditionally hunt and fish are helping to support our agency and generate a lot of revenue that comes through this, through the sale of those ammunition and sporting goods. All right, moving on to the boating fund. Again, I just want to keep saying this. We can't mix these funds. That's what makes us different. So these funding sources come through boat registration. If you have a boat, if you get out into Tennessee waterways and it has a motor, you have to get that boat registered. 51% of that is made up of that. 25% of this is where we get that federal reimbursement that we're talking about, and then 24% from the gasoline tax. Some of the examples of the way that these funds are used is through safety and education. Obviously, our officers are out doing a lot of boater education programs, trying to promote safety on the waterways. But probably the thing that matters maybe the most, something that's offered in your districts, is providing good access. We want to be able to have good access for hunters and anglers and boaters to be able to get on the water. And these funds are used to go out and build ramps, courtesy docks, fishing piers. Next is the Wetlands Fund, and you are familiar with this. It's the real estate transfer tax, and we get 3.25% on the 100 for that. And this is where we use those dollars to be able to go out and buy wetland properties. We're not in the heavily in the acquisition mode as we were probably 15 years ago on true wetland tracts. Sometimes you all allow us by statute, we're able to go in and ask for to be able to purchase upland tracts. You've allowed us to do that, I think, about 5 different times to go in and try to purchase some upland areas with wetlands funds. We also do a lot of our maintenance of our wildlife management areas with this money. So again, it would be things like the road improvements, going out, putting in habitat, going out, planting crops, say for waterfowl. And this may be where we use some of this money also for our building projects. This is a big part of our budget that really helps in that area. Can't mix that. We can't get federal match dollars whenever we use those funds on those properties. That's what makes it different. Last, I'm going to talk about our endowments. This is where people look at us and say, well, hey, you've got a lot of money in there. But we don't use the endowments as part of our operating funds. By statute, we can't really touch that endowment money. All we can use is the interest. Thank you, Mr. Ken. Lost a word there. All we can use is the interest off of that money to be able to spend that per year. So vehicle license plate, many of you have probably seen the Bluebird plate. This is one of the watchable license plates, and that's part of that endowment. And then the Lifetime Sportsman Endowment. If you have children or grandchildren, you've probably bought or hope you bought a Lifetime Sportsman's license for them. And so we can spend that interest. Now, again, some years that money that's earning interest, it loses money. So this is not part of our operational budget, not part of what we'll be presenting to you as far as the operational funds today. Reserves. People say, well, hey, you got a lot of money in reserves. There's 3 main funds, again, that fall within those reserves, that wildlife, boating, and wetlands funds that we talked about. Right now, we've got $69.7 million in our wildlife funds. Seems like a lot of money, but that's really only 7 months of operating costs for us. The boating fund is $16.5 million, 12 months of operating costs. Wetland funds is $17.8 million, again, 12 months of operating costs within that fund. So these reserves are critical to us to provide programs consistency, despite annual changes in revenue, federal funding, and program costs. So we must have these reserves to spend in order to be reimbursed by federal grants and to have funding available before we start collecting license and registration fees for the coming year. One of the things to kind of talk about here where our reserves are important, as you all know, there was an appropriation given to the other executive branches for salary increases through the compensation package this year. We were not included in that. However, we have many job titles that fall within that. So we were told that we were mandated to give those employees raises. We didn't get any money to fund that. So we had to tap into our reserves to be able to get that. We have all of our wildlife class positions now down at DOHR getting reclassified, trying to get parity across with the other executive branches. And we're going to be looking to try to fund that. That will probably be to the tune of we don't know yet till DOHR evaluates that, but that could be $6 to $8 million. And we're going to have to come up with that money on our own as an agency to be able to fund that. So here's the budget request that's before you today. We're asking for $147,648,100 total overall annual operating budget. And it's going to be broke down in those 3 categories that I told you about: $113,134,300 in wildlife, $16,457,900 in boating, and $18,055,900 in the wetland. And Madam Chair, that concludes the presentation, and we'll try to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you very much. There's a lot there to digest, and I know, again, there's a lot of interest on the committee and the work that you all do, so we'll get straight to the questions. Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady and Director Maxidon. It's good to see you here. Thank you for being here and your staff. The question I've got is not directly with the budget, but more dealing with CWD. Can you talk about, I know TWRA released a press release back in January talking about the issue with kits, testing kits to be able to identify those, deer that have been, come down with CWD. So can you, first of all, tell a little bit more about those kits? What's it look like right now? Has things gotten better? I think the number I saw, maybe some 2,200 samples, which were backlogged. So if you could just talk a little bit about that. And then the second part of that is talk about CWD. And I know that folks say that humans can't contract that disease, but what are folks doing then to make sure that they're not, I guess, and how are you all helping to make sure that's not?
Okay. Yes, sir. So the first one is there is a national shortage across the country on CWD testing kits. That's not something that's unique to our state or Tennessee. And so we are about 2,200 samples. Those kits are starting to come available, and some of the labs that have them out there are actually trading kits to try and help this problem. Same problems happening across all the other states that are trying to get their samples tested as well. So that should be coming to an end, hopefully, is what they're telling us. We should be able to get those results back sometime over the next month. Now, where that causes a problem is some of these people are holding these deer, waiting to get them processed until they get those samples back. So we're hoping that gets resolved here pretty quick. As far as CBD transferring over to humans, there is no known cases of that happening at this time. We always follow the CDC guidelines and the way that we tell people to process their deer. We tell them to get the deer tested, try to wear rubber gloves to be able to protect themselves, try to protect yourself from any brain matter, which is where you typically get this from. And if your deer tests positive, our recommendation is not to eat that deer.
Where is there a part of Tennessee, one part is seeing more, I guess, cases of CWD than the other?
Yes, sir. Hardeman and Fayette County are the two, what I would call hot zones. Now we have what we call sparks, areas that are kind of jumping out, and we anticipate that. That's known. That's what we anticipated to happen. But we've got some moving as far north as, say, Dyer County now. Not many up there, but just a few that have moved, that have tested positive up in the Dyer County area.
Any populations up in East Tennessee?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay. And that's one thing, when I first came down here, that we talked about with the director then, with Ed Carter, who was good Hawkins County and himself. But we talked about the deer population up in my neck of the woods. It actually went down a little bit. And over the past couple of years, and the population has come back up. So that's one thing that I've been glad to see. Then, of course, seeing with CWD and what's still kind of out in West Tennessee, I hope we can eradicate that and get that so we don't see the effects of that up in my neck of the woods. But anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for your staff.
And just as a follow-up on that, you said as far north as Dyer, is Hardeman County, is that as far east as it's been chronic wasting disease has been identified to date?
Going blank, what's the county east of Hardeman? Somebody West Tennessee, help me. The next one east of. So it goes as far east as McNary. So, and what we've got in that CW zone, the county, and I'm drawing a blank on the county name, but the county that just crosses the Tennessee River, we've got it in the county west of the Tennessee River down around south. I think Lawrence is the next one over. It's not there yet. The reality is it's probably moving that way. It'd just be a matter of time.
And I guess it seems that we've maybe slowed progress, but not stopped it. So is there anything else that we could be doing that would halt it?
No, ma'am. In fact, our team is probably one of the leading teams in the country. We've got Dr. Dan Grove that cooperates with us as a UT veterinarian, and we've really ramped up our efforts. You know, we're kind of doing this we have some targeted removal. So if a spark pops up, we work with USDA Wildlife Services, and we will go in with landowner permission. We will work with landowners if they will allow us, and we'll try to remove deer around those spark areas. The rest of it's done through hunting. We rely solely on our hunters to be able to go in and help with this process.
All right, thank you. I know we have other things to talk about, so we'll move on, but that's just a huge concern, I think, just a health concern. I understand there's no proven jump from deer to humans, but we still, I think it's a risk that most of us would rather not take. Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just looking at the agency's response in the finance questionnaire. So for 21-22, TWRA budgeted $14 million in revenue under the Boating Safety Act. And so the actual collections, they were closer to about $11.5 million. So I didn't know if you could maybe just kind of take us through that, just brief explanation of the source of that revenue, how the agency uses the funds, and then are there specific reasons maybe why that was under collected last year? If you could just kind of maybe give us some overview on that.
I am going to turn to our chief of budget and ask him to assist us on there. He'll be able to talk more about the collections and where they're going.
Thank you, Director. Am I on? Okay, I apologize.
For the
Since-
record, just if you would state your name and
Sure.
title.
Ken Tarkington, Chief of Budget. The main sources of income are stated there. The biggest one, the largest one, is boat registrations. During the COVID period, we found that we had an increase in boat registrations as well as hunting and fishing licenses, which is good. People got out and they were enjoying the outdoors. That has maintained itself to a degree in the wildlife arena, but it hasn't in the boating. The boat registrations are down. It doesn't mean that people aren't necessarily enjoying it. They may be going with someone else. It's just that that coupled with a 1, 2, or 3 year registration, we're seeing a downward trend in that revenue source.
Leader Cox.
That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank y'all for being here, and thank you for what you do down in West Tennessee. We appreciate you all. Your CARP program was established back in 2018, and I know the program created a network between vendors and fishermen to enhance the commercial carp industry. Now, in FY22, nearly 8 million pounds of carp were harvested through this program. Does the agency use any other measurement beside the amount harvest to determine the success of the program? If so, explain how they do that.
Yeah, this is Frank Fisk, Deputy Director of Business Operations. I'd worked in the CART program before this position, and that program is moving forward this year successfully, and we're on target to do about the same amount of pounds removed. But I think your question is how much more fish are being removed, or what else are we doing to determine if it's successful? And what we're doing is monitoring fish populations, like sport fish populations in these lakes where the carp are, particularly Kentucky Lake, where we're putting a lot of focus on that. And we're monitoring to see if we see improvements in sport fishing activity, fewer complaints from the public about seeing fish. In general, we've been getting positive feedback. That's not the same as scientific data. That's what we're trying to do, is get the scientific data to show that the removal at this rate is keeping our sport fish populations intact. The other thing that we're doing is working with partners to identify places to put deterrents in. Most of the fish that we see, particularly in the Cumberland and Tennessee rivers, are migrants that have come in from the Ohio River. So we're very interested in keeping deterrents at the mouths of those rivers, the dams at Barkley and Kentucky, and upstream at Wilson, to kind of box them in while commercial fishermen are working on them. We need to have, we are working on more tools besides just harvest numbers to see how we're doing though.
I have follow-up, Madam Chair.
Representative.
Does the agency contract with any out-of-state commercial fishermen and, that would affect the area near any bordered states?
At this time, we only have 3 contracted buyers, we're calling for our contractors are people that buy from fishermen. Now, if people are fishing in the state of Kentucky, they can sell their fish to our buyers as long as they're coming from Tennessee and Cumberland River fisheries. As far as like a Mississippi River, we haven't gotten any federal funding to target those areas because it's a much more difficult lift to control that reproducing population by just harvest. But in the last couple of years, we have been trying to recruit more interest in harvesting fish in Pickwick Reservoir, which would affect the Mississippi, our partners in Mississippi, because that's also the whole partnership is focused on that Tennessee River, less so than the Memphis. There are areas there that we have had interest from outside people to come in and set up processing places on the Mississippi River, and we're not discouraging that, but it's less. It's probably going to be less lucrative for them because we don't have the incentive money to back them initially.
One final question, madam.
Certainly.
Is the Asian carp good for breakfast?
So it certainly is. is a very good tasting fish that's being marketed nationally as Kopi right now to get it on the plate a little easier. And it's a nice white meat, and it takes all kinds of flavoring very well.
We'll take your word for it, or at least I will. Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady. We will take their word for it. Gentlemen, thanks for coming today. Director, it's good to see you. As you know, there's been a little discussion over the last several years regarding automated draws as it relates to waterfowl. 2016, we started using Brant information systems to manage the applications grant process. I think 2020, the Comptroller's Office came out with a report as it relates to their study or the action as it concerns to some of us had, and of course, the citizens of the state. I wondered if you could share with me what you guys have been able to do, or what improvements you've been able to make as it relates to those draws since based upon that Comptroller's report, or what you found along the way. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so we were not without mistake. We moved pretty quick on that thing early on in the initial phase. But what we saw this year is way less complaints. Now, I'm not going to say that everybody is completely satisfied with that program, but I think it's taken the public a little bit of time to adapt and adjust, because obviously it's new and it's changed. But we held a meeting in Dyersburg, a commission meeting, and it was pretty much focused around waterfowl. We had a couple of waterfowl presentations, and I actually thought if folks were, going to come and raise concerns over the draw, that they would do it at that meeting. We didn't have anybody that showed up there. So I felt like that was a positive and a plus, that we're kind of headed in a good direction with that. As far as changes, we've made some minor adjustments just to make it easier for people with the draw. There's really no big changes, because that would require a rule change if we did anything with that. So we really haven't made any major adjustments. And so, my hopes are that everything will be tried again for another year, just like we are in this phase. I think people are starting to adapt to it. I think they're liking the Tier 2 system better. Even the people that originally were in opposition to it, they seem to be getting drawed fairly frequent and having really good hunts on it. So I think overall it's starting to make a shift toward, I won't say everybody's satisfied, but I think it's making a shift toward a little bit more positivity amongst people statewide.
Chairman.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and thank you for that. I do know that obviously when we rolled out the idea of doing it in the beginning, I found out there were a lot more duck hunters in Tennessee than I thought before. But anyways, and I had an opportunity to spend some time out west, saw you out there, and the Rabbit Sheriff, as his new nickname would have it, which I know he loves. But I'm thankful that you had an opportunity thankful that you guys had an opportunity to send him home a few weeks ago. He probably had the biggest cardiac event that any hunter did out there. So I'm glad to see him safe. I did want to mention one thing that's kind of a big week for Nashville next week. And I wondered how it impacts you, or how TWRA is involved. It's not every day that there's a cross section between a convention and what's going on in the sporting world. It's really unusual to do that. And I know that you guys are well aware, and I know Representative Freeman and I have been in contact with Safari Club International, and they're coming here and bringing 20,000 of their best friends and fellow hunters and fishermen here. So I just wondered what TWRA is doing in order to try to stimulate that. What we'd love for them to do is to come back for many, many years and spend some time here and some tax revenue, which is nice. But I didn't know if you guys had any involvement with that process, or booth exhibitors or anything like that. If you could share something about that, that'd be great.
Yes, sir, we do. So we will actually have a booth there. We have several staff members that are working with SCI folks on different events. In fact, Tory Grimes, our general counsel, he's going to make a law presentation there with attorneys from all across the country. I'm going to be presenting at part of the directors' events, where several directors will be presenting on bear issues that many states are dealing with. And then we'll have a booth there. We'll be there the whole time with the booth set up, trying to educate people on who we are as an agency, and then talking about hunting and fishing license sales, and actually promoting things that the agency does.
Madam Chair, if I could add.
Yes, Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would add, Representative Williams, that of course, many of us know in the hunting community, we also have National Wild Turkey Federation national convention here this weekend in Nashville. And I think several of the legislators are going to a reception that the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation is putting on. I see Representative Williams may not know that's happening, and I'll get you an invitation if I need to get you an invitation. And anybody else who might want to stay over, I believe it's Thursday evening, if I remember right. So yes, we've got two of the premier hunting organizations in the whole country coming back to Nashville to showcase what we have going on here in Tennessee to bring more tourism money to our state. And so it's a win all the way around for us, and it's something that we are involved with as an agency as well. Thank you.
Chairman Williams.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask for an update. I know the Corps had been communicating with you guys and Trout Unlimited and stuff like that. Some of y'all may know I really enjoy fly fishing and on the Caney. The waterway there has gotten challenging in regards to, and I'm being kind, in the last 2 years. And so I know that there's been some generation discussion with the Corps, TVA, and those kinds of things. And I know there was a discussion had with Senator Hagerty's office last week or week before last. So if you guys have any information about that or you know something more, I'd love to get an update. In my office will be fine. So thank you.
I didn't go to that.
We do not have an update, sir. We're getting ready to work maybe on the issue with the waterways, but as far as the generation, I don't have an update on that.
We were happy to see that a lot of their proposed alternatives did provide minimum flow. So we're thinking there's something we can work with there, but I'm not sure how they find where they're at on that decision.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Chair Lady. And thank you for all you do. I think the TWRA is one of the most important organizations here in Tennessee, just for what you do for those that both love to hunt and fish and those that also enjoy the outdoors. And Mr. Bell brought up turkey, and I've received dozens of calls asking about the change in the start of the turkey season, number one, the lower the bag limits. When I was a child, turkey were reintroduced, and what a great success we've had here. And are we seeing a decline in turkey number? And if so, what are we doing about that? So those three questions.
Yes, sir. I'll take that one. And so in response, we have an ongoing turkey study with the University of Tennessee. We should be coming up on the completion of that pretty soon. And what that study was looking at was the decline in turkey populations, specifically in southern Middle Tennessee. We've also noticed a decline in turkey populations out near the Mississippi River. And so the commission wanted to take some type of action to try and help with this as far as the population. So they did move the season back 2 weeks, and they reduced the turkey bag by 1. So that reduced it back down to 2. And that's why that action was taken, was to try to help with those declines. Now, what we have seen that's positive this year is we have a reporting system where people can report on turkey hatches every year, and then we have staff that go out and evaluate this too. It looks like right now we're doing really well. I think we're going to see a good spring unless something were to happen, say with avian influenza or something in our turkey flocks. But right now, I think it's going to be really up this year based on those early initial surveys of what we've seen as far as responses on what the hatch look like.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you. And then, I'm one of those people Representative Williams talked about that's an avid duck hunter. And the wetland fund, I see that in your slideshow, one of the examples of what you do with that is to purchase wetland habitat. Two questions there. One, do we have targets of wetland habitat that we are actively pursuing and trying to purchase? And two, do we buy other habitat outside of wetlands with that wetland fund money?
Okay, so yes, we do have a system. To answer the first question, we try to target certain river systems or areas. What we want to do specifically is try for connectivity. Now, we never purchase unless we have a willing landowner, and it's getting less and less because it's getting harder to find properties. But we do, if a property comes up, say in West Tennessee on the Forkadere River system, where we have, say, Tigrit WMA or a critical wetland, if we know there's any kind of species that's imperiled, whether that be waterfowl or something else, we want to target those. And there's modeling tools that tell us where those areas lie. So we have a strategic plan that helps us target those wetland areas to try to purchase. So that answers the first question. And go back to the second question.
I think I can take the second question. It's about, do we ever purchase any other property with that wetland fund?
Non-wetland properties, specifically what I'm concerned with.
So 5 times since 1997, we've purchased non-wetland property, and we have to come to the legislature and ask for a specific exemption to do that. And it's when we find a piece of property that's exceptional and that we need to be able to use wetlands money to purchase it because of, let's see, just financially, it makes more sense for the agency to do it. The last time it was done in 2016, it was actually on a bill that Chairman Hazelwood had. And before that, in 2014, it was a bill that I carried. And it was done in 97, 98, 2002, 2014, and 2016. And we've actually got a bill that'll be coming forth this year to create another exception, because we found a great piece of property that joins Catoosa Wildlife Management Area in Cumberland County. And we're going to ask permission for another exception, which is rare. This will only be the 6th time it's happened since 1997, but to use wetlands money to purchase some upland property that's just great property and fits the agency's mission.
Thank you.
Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This may actually be a good segue. On the first question of your questionnaire, you've mentioned in your wetlands acquisition fund, you've got here that budgeted 18 million for the realty transfer tax and actually collected 32.4 million. But when I look at your fund balance, it doesn't seem to have a corresponding increase. So where did that 14 million go? Because you mentioned earlier in your original presentation that you didn't have any plans to acquire any property. So, and as a real estate attorney, I know that number was probably the same in 2021 as well, that it outpaced what was budgeted. So where's that money going?
Well, the Ken Tarkington budget, the amount that is represented here is what's in the budget document. Am I still not on?
There you go.
I apologize. The amount that's in the here for you're referring to the 17 million on the right side. Why it's lower?
Representative Barrett.
So on the first page of the questionnaire that was returned back to the committee, question 1 shows amount budgeted for FY 21-22 for realty transfer tax interest, miscellaneous 18,055,000, and shows actual collections of 32,469,000. So when you go back over through your presentation,
what accounts for the difference?
Correct. There's $14 million that was collected more than budgeted, but your fund balance has not increased over the last several years that you've.
That's correct. And we have made wetlands purchases in the acquisition fund itself. We've actually bought properties. We just haven't bought it as much as we have in the past. But a couple of years ago, the legislature approved the agency to use the funds, some of the funds in that acquisition fund, for maintenance not only of the properties that were purchased with the wetlands acquisition funds, but properties that were owned by the state and under the jurisdiction of the TWRA, such as WMAs and properties such as that the director had talked about. We've used the balance of those funds to maintain and enhance those properties.
Representative Barrett.
Could you, I'm sorry, you may not have this information in front of you, but can you kind of explain how $14 million would be spent? What type of maintenance was done?
Gravel for WMAs, enhancements to properties that are buildings, excuse me, that are spread all over the state that the TWRA manages, routes for those buildings, wetlands properties that where we will enhance the area, perhaps keep water off our neighbors because of the water that's on it. It's a pretty major undertaking statewide.
And just to, so that I guess we can all more fully understand that, if we could get maybe a breakdown of those expenses and, where they've occurred, just so we'll, to the representative's point, so we'll understand where those additional funds, while the fund balance has not shot up dramatically, where those have been expended. Do we have any other questioners? Well, Director Bell, I believe you have gotten out really easily. We respect your health issues and don't want to cause another cardiac event. So we've been extremely kind. And again, we thank you. I'm not a hunter, but I know plenty of who are. And so, but I do appreciate the conservation of Tennessee's wetlands and parks and all of the other things and all the other ways that TWRA is engaged. And, I think we have a tremendous number of miles of waterways in the state and acres of land that are available for Tennesseans to enjoy in whatever way they choose to do so. And you all are a big part of making sure that we continue to have that to offer our citizens. So we thank you for that effort. Thank you for being here today. Director Bell, don't blow it now.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, I would mention you've got one of the most beautiful WMAs we have in the whole state of Tennessee with Prentice Cooper, which is in your district, which is, that gorge where the Tennessee River goes through the mountains there is just absolutely stunning. And it is one of the WMAs. It's actually a state forest, if I'm not mistaken, but we manage it as a WMA, which is one of the jewels of our state. And it's right there in your district.
The Tennessee River Gorge is really, there are not a lot of good ways to see it. From the river is the best way, but it's breathtaking. It truly is. And in fact, there's a story when BW was choosing their location, they were looking at Huntsville, where they had flat land ready to go, and Chattanooga, and they flew them over the area and flew over the gorge. And that was a huge selling point for a number of the BW officials that were on the plains. So, assets do matter. But again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Without objection, we are now back in session. It does complete our calendar for today. Is there any other business for this committee? Seeing none, a reminder, we will resume budget hearings 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. But remember, committee members, if we continue and we do these at a good pace beginning early, then we'll be finished the first week in March. So just put on your big girl underwear and come on. So
Wrong day.
With that comment, I should have adjourned prior to, but we are now adjourned.